That always happens. I'd like to talk about a couple of things this morning. We can go to Genesis chapter 25. We're going to talk about the story of Esau and Jacob. Verse 29 we'll start in. Now Esau and Jacob were brothers, and they were totally opposite each other. Jacob, by cunning and with the help of his mother, and through a prophetic word from God in the beginning, ended up getting the blessing that was designed for the eldest son. Back in those days, the eldest son was the one that had the blessing that was passed down from the father, and he passed it down to his eldest son as well. But you see, Jacob was born second, and through cunning and, as I said, a prophetic word that happened and the help of his mother, he ended up taking the blessing away from Esau. Now, if we read the story there, what actually happened was Esau was a man's man. He was a warrior. He was everything that depicted a manly person with I guess, bravado and all of that today. The type of guys you see down there with the elbow on the pub bench there with a jug of beer, bragging about his exploits. He was a hairy man. He was red. The word Esau means red because he had red hair, and he was a hunter. And he used to go out, and his dad loved him. His dad loved the stew that he used to be able to cook from the venison that he killed. And he was like the dad's favourite. But of course, Jacob, the second one, was fear. He had smoother skin, and he was mummy's boy. Now, in normal human terms, if you look at that, that's the desire, I guess, that every man has in his manhood out there in the world, to be the man. Esau was the man. Anyway, what happened was in verse 25, Genesis 25, verse 29. Jacob cooked a stew, and Esau came in from the field, and he was weary. And Esau said to Jacob, "Please feed me with that same red stew, for I am weary." Therefore his name was called Edom, or the red, I think it was. But Jacob said, "Sell me your birthright as of this day." So Jacob wasn't budging. He stood there with his stew, looked at him, knew his brother was hungry, and he said, "You sell me your birthright." Esau said, "Look, I'm about to die, so what is this birthright to me?" And Jacob said, "Swear to me as of this day." So he swore to him. So Esau didn't care about the birthright, and Jacob cornered him again and said, "You swear to me as of this day." So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. And Jacob gave Esau bread and stew of lentils, gave Esau bread, stew of lentils. Then he ate and drank, arose and went his way, thus despising his birthright. Probably with a big burp. It's an interesting story. He was the eldest son, Jacob was the younger. Later on, when he lost the birthright and he tried to get it back with tears. If we go over to Hebrews chapter 12, verse 16 to 26. Now you see, that's the Old Testament. What actually happened, and as we go through the story, there's actually some interesting things that happens here. If you have a look in Hebrews there, it calls in the New Testament, Paul said, therefore, 16 to 26, lest there be any fornicator or profane person like Esau, who for one morsel of food sold his birthright. Lest there be any fornicator or profane person like Esau, who for one morsel of food sold his birthright. For you know that afterwards, when he wanted to inherit the blessing, he was rejected, for he found no place for repentance, though he sought it diligently with tears. When he knew he lost it, and when he knew that blessing went down through to Jacob, he burst into tears and said, Father, have you not a blessing for me? And he says, I've given all the good stuff to your brother. Too late, sorry. I can bless you in other areas. And from that moment on, Jacob became Israel, the nation. Esau became a tribe of Edomites that you don't even hear about today. The powerful man's man that went out and hunted and was the big tough man and all of that. The eldest son ended up becoming a no-no. But whilst I say that, he's in the Bible. Now, profane. The word profane means to treat something sacred with abuse. Irreverence or contempt. Desecrate, abase, bastardize, cheapen, corrupt, debauch, degrade, pervert, prostitute. See, the New Testament, the man's man was the prostituted. The man's man debased what was given him as a birthly right. He didn't have to earn it. All he had to do was be born first. And he did no job or work to retain that. Jacob did his damnedest to get the blessing, and he got it. And he went off and he became Israel, a nation. Interesting thought. Profane. Treat something sacred with abuse. If we go to Luke 14, verse 16 to 24. Jesus speaking here in the parables, and he said, a certain man gave a great supper, and he invited many. He sent his servant at supper time to say to those who were invited, come, for all things are now ready. But they all with one accord began to make excuses. The first said to him, I have bought a piece of ground. I must go and see it. I ask you to have me excused. Another said, I bought 5 yoke of oxen. I'm going to test them. I asked you to have me excused. Still another said, I have married a wife, and therefore I cannot come. Obviously he had to go and prove the wife, asked to be excused. So that the servant came and reported these things to his master. Then the master of the house became angry, and he said to his servant, go out quickly into the streets and lanes of the city. Bring in there the poor and the maimed and the lame and the blind. And the servant said, Master, it is done as you commanded, and still there is room left. The master said, go out into the highways and hedges and compel them to come in, that my house may be filled. He's talking about the poor that were sleeping in the hedges and the highways. For I say to you that none of those men who were invited shall taste my supper.